I'm your host, Jimmy Chen. Arrgh. Hello, I am Jimmy Chen, your host of this channel, Food for HNM. It's like food for thought, where we read and discuss many things from the Holy Bible. We are in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 7. We are reading chapter 7. The next section is titled Solomon builds his palace, his castle. It took Solomon 13 years, however, to complete the construction of his palace. So one thing we might want to notice is that he built God, the Creator, the Lord. Remember, he's called the Lord. The Lord is the Son of God. God, the Creator, is God in three persons. He is the Father, the Son. He's like the eternal Son and the Holy Spirit. God in three persons, or he is also called the most blessed, thrice holy, the most blessed, holy Trinity. So the Lord is the main dude, the Son. He is the second person of the Godhead. That's another term, the Godhead. So he built the Lord's temple first before building his own palace. That is considered a righteous act. It took him 13 years, so he didn't spend more time on his own palace. He actually spent more money and hired more people to get the temple built faster. So he built the palace of the forest of Lebanon, 100 cubits long, 50 feet wide, and 30 feet high, with four rows of cedar columns supporting trimmed cedar beams. It was roofed with cedar. Above the beams that rested on the columns, 45 beams, 15 to a row. Its windows were placed high in sets of 3 facing each other. All the doorways had rectangular frames. They were in the front part in sets of 3 facing each other. He made a colonnade 50 cubits long and 30 wide. In front of it was a portico, and in front of that were pillars and an overhanging roof. He built the throne hall, the Hall of Justice, not the Super Friends, not the Justice League Hall of Justice. He built his own, Solomon's Hall of Justice, where he was to judge. So he was like like we have the Supreme Court, and in the Supreme Court we have Supreme Court justices, those type of judges. So he, besides being a king, remember, he was also a prophet. He also served the people as the judge, and he covered it with cedar from floor to ceiling. And the palace in which he was to live, set farther back, was similar in design. So there's 2 palaces. Solomon also made a palace like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had married. Oh, that's 3 palaces. one for his wife. How nice. All these structures, from the outside to the great courtyard, and from foundation to eaves, were made of blocks of high-grade stone, cut to size and smoothed on their inner and outer faces. The foundations were laid with large stones of good quality, some measuring 10 cubits and some 8. Above were high-grade stones, cut to size, and cedar beams. The great courtyard was surrounded by a wall of 3 courses of dressed stone, and 1 course of trimmed cedar beams, as was the inner courtyard of the temple of the Lord with its portico. The next section is titled The Temple's Furnishings. So, what is a place without furniture? You need furniture. King Solomon sent to Tyre and brought Huram, whose mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and whose father was from Tyre. And a skilled craftsman in bronze. So remember the tabernacle, Moses, if you watched my earlier video, there was Bezalel and Oholiab. There are these 2 highly skilled craftsmen, that designed and had everything built. They designed and built the tabernacle and like the altar, and then like the it's called a lampstand, some tables, a basin, the inner incense burner. They designed everything. And, made them for God, the Creator. But God, He actually gave Moses, because remember He spoke to Moses. He told Moses exactly how He wanted them made. Just like these specs, these specifications. So, He's not God is not terrible, He tells you, like, in general, I want, he's like a guy. I want this, and, he doesn't sound like that. He's authoritative, he's mighty. So we have Huram, who's a craftsman, good with bronze. Huram was filled with wisdom, with understanding, and with knowledge, to do all kinds of bronze work. He came to King Solomon and did all the work assigned to him. He cast 2 bronze pillars, each 18 cubits high and 12 cubits in circumference. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set on the tops of the pillars, Each capital was 5 cubits high, dude. A network of interwoven chines adorned the capitals on top of the pillars, 7 for each capital. He made pomegranates, divided in 2 rows, encircling each network to decorate the capitals on top of the pillar. On top of the pillars. He did the same for each capital. I really shouldn't do that, actually. But I heard that if you are Chinese, you can do the Chinese accent. But the Chinese accent is, I don't like it because you have to you have to not enunciate the last, consonant. You don't know what I'm saying. The sentence is, he made pomegranates in 2 rows, encircling each network to decorate the capitals on top of the pillars, right? I think it's just, he made, it's like no made, he made pomegranate, no N, two row encircling each network to decorate the capital on top of the pillar. See, you don't know what I'm saying. You don't know what words I said. He did the same for each capital. The capitals on top of the pillars in the portico were in the shape of lilies. Lilies are usually when someone passes away, you want to give lilies. Really quickly, what do you give for Valentine's Day? Roses. Now, if you want to be put in the friend zone, go ahead and give them carnations. 4 cubits high on the capitals of both pillars above the bowl-shaped part next to the network were the 200 pomegranates. Now let's look at pomegranates. Pomegranates, I heard, are a very healthy fruit. There's persimmons and there's pomegranates. So we are very familiar with pomegranates. There was that juice palm. Where pomegranates are like very red, and you open them up, and there's like these red seeds inside of them. But pomegranates, I've learned, are a religious symbol, just like the cone. Like a cone. The trees. These cones fall down from trees. Like a pine cone. The pine cone is a religious symbol, and the pomegranate, even now, is a religious symbol. So there are 200 of these pomegranates in rows all around. He erected the pillars at the portico of the temple. The pillar to the south he named Jachin, and the one to the north Boaz. The capitals on top were in the shape of lilies, and so the work on the pillars were completed. He made the sea of cast metal, circular in shape. So he made like a art piece. Like you go to the museum. Outside the museum, you might see something very large. An artist made that. So he tried to depict the ocean, the sea. And it was circular in shape, measuring 10 cubits from rim to rim and 5 cubits high. It took a line of 30 cubits to measure around it. Below the rim, gourds encircled it, 10 to a cubit. The gourds. Okay, remember a gourd's like a pumpkin, It's not a pumpkin. A gourd is more this kind of shape, But remember the gourds, well, it's very simple, right? You chop them in half and you split them open, right? They're very hard to cut. Be very careful. Be very careful cutting a pumpkin or a gourd, because they are the skin, it's like a shell. It's like very thick, and if you use a knife or a cleaver, you could just slip and you could hurt yourself. Be very, very careful cutting pumpkins or gourds. So gourds encircled it, 10 to a cubit. The gourds were cast in 2 rows, in one piece with the sea. The sea stood on 12 bowls, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea rested on top of them, and their hind quarters, the bowls, hind quarters, those are their butts, were toward the center. It was a hand breadth in thickness, and its rim was like the rim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It held 2,000 baths. So baths, let's look at the note. This is a long chapter. The bath, it says, Hiram G. Let's magnify, zoom in at baths. It's V. Wait, no, hold on. It's 12,000 gallons. 12,000 gallons. So remember, baths. You pour water in baths. So what they put? You know, when they talk about baths, it could be also something like grain. You know, someone mentioned that you pour liquid in a bath. So when they say, oh, there's 50 baths of, I guess, so 50 baths of water, for example. So gallons of water. But I think the measurement bath might have been like that. Like you can have 50 baths of like grain. Because, you know, like oatmeal, you could just, oatmeal is not grain, really. But, wait, what is it? Oats. I think it might be grain. Okay. So, you know, you could pour that into something like a bath. Yeah, you could, because you don't weigh gallons, really. I think that it's the size of the container. So remember, Solomon has built three palaces. So you might wonder, what is the first one for? The other two, like he lives in one, and then his wife, the queen, lives in the other. So it seems like I mentioned that he rules. You know, he makes rulings as a judge there. But I think they hang out and party there. You know, like it's beautiful. Like, he calls in royalty, and then, you know, he'll meet with people and party down. Excellent there. So we're at verse 27. He also made 10 movable stands of bronze. Each was 4 cubits long, 4 wide, and 3 high. This is how the stands were made. They had side panels attached to uprights. On the panels between the uprights were lions, bulls, and cherubim, and on the uprights as well, above and below the lions and bulls, were wreaths of hammered work. Each stand had 4 bronze wheels. Four bronze wheels with bronze axles. And each had a basin resting on 4 supports, cast with wreaths on each side. On the inside of the stand, and there, on the inside of the stand, there was an opening that had a circular frame, 1 cubit deep. This opening was round, and with its basework it measured 1.5 cubits. Around its opening there was engraving. The panels of the stands were square, not round. The 4 wheels were under the panels, and the axles of the wheels were attached to the stand. The diameter of each wheel was 1.5 cubits. The wheels were made like chariot wheels. The axles, rims, spokes, and hubs were all of cast metal. Each stand had 4 handles, 1 on each corner, projecting from the stand. At the top of the stand there was a circular band, 1/2 cubit deep. The supports and panels were attached to the top of the stand. He engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees on the surfaces of the supports and on the panels in every available space, with wreaths all around. This is the way he made the 10 stands. They were all cast in the same molds and were identical in size and shape. He then made 10 bronze basins, each holding 40 baths. That's gigantic. Let's take a look at the note V. 240 gallons. Each basin held 240 gallons and measuring 4 cubits across. One basin to go on each of the 10 stands. So each of these stands held something like a basin. It's like a, like a big pot. Not a pot, like you boil water in a pot, but remove the handle. So there's a large pot, right? But it holds 240 gallons. And then you put that on top of one of these stands. He placed 5 of the stands on the south side of the temple and 5 on the north. He placed the sea on the south side. At the southeast corner of the temple, he also made the pots and shovels and sprinkling bowls. So Huram finished all the work he had undertaken for King Solomon in the temple of the Lord. The 2 pillars, the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars. A lot of bowls. No, not bowls. The 2 sets of network decorating the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars. The 400 pomegranates for the 2 sets of network. 2 rows of pomegranates for each network, decorating the bowl-shaped capitals on the top of the pillars. The 10 stands with their 10 basins, the sea and the 12 bowls under it, the pots, shovels, and sprinkling bowls. All these objects that Huram made for King Solomon for the temple of the Lord were of burnished bronze. So these objects were for the temple. Remember, the title of this section is the temple furnishings. I mentioned furniture, but these furnishings don't seem like furniture. Don't seem like it. The king had them cast in clay molds in the plain of the Jordan, between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon left all these things unweighed because there were so many. The weight of the bronze was not determined. Solomon also made all the furnishings that were in the Lord's temple, the golden altar, the golden table on which was the bread of the presence. The bread of the presence. Remember, when God is with you, His presence is felt. You can perceive. He is here. So the bread is not super bread. It's there's bread that has a lot of different kinds of seeds and oats. There's nothing that special about the bread. The bread was made from flour, and you had to put oil in it, and of course there was something called incense, spices, samim or samin. So it's fragrant bread, but those things, individually, they're all just normal ingredients. Ingredients, yeah. So you had to put 12 loaves of these loaves of bread, on this golden table. Remember, spoiler alert, Jesus the Lord. Remember, I just mentioned the Lord. He's the Son of God, right? The second main due of the Godhead. He's the main guy. The Lord. He said he is the bread of life. So he's the bread somehow, He's bread. So when you look at bread, you can think Jesus. It doesn't mean you eat him, because bread is bread, But when you think of him, maybe he's around. But I mentioned he is something called omnipresent. God is three omnis. Omnipotent, that's all powerful. Omniscient, remember, like the word science, but you just put a T in there somewhere. Omniscient, he just knows everything. He's all knowing, and he's omnipresent. He's like everywhere. Not only is he everywhere, all the time he's everywhere. Verse 49, the lampstand is of pure gold, 5 on the right and 5 on the left, in front of the inner sanctuary. So now there are 10 lampstands. I wonder if they kept the old one. The gold floral work and lamps and tongs, the pure gold basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, dishes and censers, and the gold sockets for the doors of the innermost room, the most holy place, and also for the doors of the main hall of the temple. When all the work King Solomon had done for the temple of the Lord was finished, he brought in the things his father David had dedicated, the silver and gold and the furnishings, and he placed them in the treasuries of the Lord's temple. So I want to look at this again. There was an altar, which is now gold. There's a table, the lampstands. There's lamps and tongs. So there are more lamps. You know, it's very beautiful. You ever see a video with like all these little candles on the floor? You know, and they're all lit, you know. When when Moses was around, there was just one impressive lampstand. It was big, it was gold. There were like 7, split into 7, like one main lamp. It's a lampstand, so you know it looked like this, and you put a lamp, not a candle, an actual oil lamp. You know, oil lamps. Yeah, I guess it's close enough. And then there were like one, that's 2, right? So it's 3. You know, something like that. 5, 6, 7. You know, like it was big though. It was a big lampstand. But there's only one. So now there are 10, maybe 11, because maybe he kept that one, the old one. And then this is lamps, so there's maybe all these little lamps made of gold, you know, like all around. Must have been very beautiful. You light it all up, you know. And there are pure gold basins, which are sprinkling bowls, dishes, and censers. Okay, let's move on to the next chapter. Hopefully it's not as long. First, we're moving to 1 Kings chapter 8. Chapter 8, the next section is titled, "The Ark is Brought to the Temple." Then King Solomon summoned into his presence with a little p. Presence with a little p. You know, God's presence has a capital P. Wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. At Jerusalem, the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes and the chiefs of the Israelite families, to bring up the ark of the Lord's covenant from Zion. You know, Zion can be pronounced Zion, the city of David. Oh, okay, so Jerusalem. Remember, it's also pronounced Jerusalem. Remember, it was the Jebusite city. You know, Israelites hated Jebusites, you know. Those Jebusites. So they took it over and made it their city. And they called it the City of David. All the Israelites came together to King Solomon at the time of the festival, in the month of HNM, the 7th month. HNM. When all the elders of Israel had arrived, the priests took up the ark. Remember, only the priests can handle it. But they can't touch it or look inside. And they brought up the ark of the Lord and the tent of meeting and all the sacred furnishings in it. The priests and Levites carried them up. Remember, they carried it on their shoulders, and there were poles, 2 poles made of gold. That when there were these rings, 4 rings, you can use your imagination. 4 rings that were already attached somehow to the ark, and they slid these gold poles through those rings, like hoops. And these priests carried it up, and King Solomon and the entire assembly of Israel that had gathered about him were before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and cattle that they could not be recorded or counted. I could just hear vegans, crying out in outrage. The priests then brought the ark of the Lord's covenant to its place in the inner sanctuary of the temple, the most holy place, and put it beneath the wings of the cherubim. The cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark and overshadowed the ark and its carrying poles. These poles were so long that their ends could be seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but not from outside the holy place, and they are still there today. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 stone tablets that Moses had placed in it. So except they also put they put Aaron's staff, that's Moses' brother, the high priest. They put his staff in there. And they also put like manna, this bread that fell from heaven. So they took those out, and only the stone tablets, the 10 commandments that were written on these heavy stone slabs by the finger of God. God wrote it himself. It was like this laser came out of nowhere. Right? So that's the reason they try to protect it. Very holy. Where the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites after they came out of Egypt. When the priests withdrew from the holy place, the cloud filled the temple of the Lord, and the priests could not perform their service because of the cloud. For the glory of the Lord filled his temple. So the cloud is the glory of the Lord. Remember, there's the Spirit of the Lord power, right? So let's not get into powers right now, but something cloudy, they look like the clouds in the sky, somehow came out of nowhere, like that guy Nightcrawler in X-Men, would just bounce and appear, right? Pooh. And he's just, pooh. No, I look more like Quicksilver there, but they just look like clouds, it's not dark, and there was no smell. I remember when Nightcrawler teleports, there's this burning smell. But these clouds were named the glory of the Lord. And we'll get into what the clouds R. Okay. Then Solomon said, the Lord has said that he would dwell in a dark cloud. I have indeed built a magnificent temple for you, a place for you to dwell forever. I think this is poetical. Some of you would say the cloud is, like night crawler's bath. A dark cloud is, Solomon is paying a lot of respect to the Lord. He is saying that, you are the glory of God, the one and only. Like, if people could see you, you would shine brighter than the sun. So these clouds that are called your glory, they don't do you justice. Like, it's just his way of saying that now he's comparing the temple he built with the cloud. He's just saying, I did my best, Lord. I hope you are pleased. He's like, it's not good. It's not good. If he saw the temple, it's like, whoa, ooh, you know what I mean? But Solomon's just like very humbly, like, it's beautiful, but it's still not good enough, because God, you are worth, much more than this. You are higher and greater. Like, you deserve better than even this. The Lord has said that He would dwell. That's saying, like, you have to live. I've built you somewhere to dwell, and you have to live in this, like you. The Lord has said that He would dwell in a dark cloud. I have indeed built a magnificent temple for you, a place for you to dwell forever. While the whole assembly of Israel was standing there, the king turned around and blessed them. Then he said, Praise be to the Lord. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, or Baruch atah Adonai, the God of Israel, Ha'el Israel, who with his own hand has fulfilled what he promised with his own mouth to my father David. For he said, Since the day I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, I have not chosen a city in any tribe of Israel to have a temple built, so that my name might be there. But I have chosen David to rule my people Israel. My father David had it in his heart to build a temple for the name of the Lord. Remember, in my earlier videos, that is like the fame of the Lord, the great name, to magnify his name, to increase his reputation, the God of Israel, Ha'el Israel. But the Lord said to my father David, You did well to have it in your heart to build a temple for my name. Nevertheless, you are not the one to build the temple, but your son, your own flesh and blood. He is the one who will build the temple for my name. The Lord has kept the promise he made. I have succeeded David my father, and now I sit on the throne of Israel, just as the Lord promised. And I have built the temple for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. I have provided a place there for the ark, in which is the covenant of the Lord that he made with our ancestors when he brought them out of Egypt. The next section is titled Solomon's Prayer of Dedication. Oh, it's a prayer. So, prayers are royal. King Solomon's a king, and he, what I found out? I was looking up the song Pop Goes the Weasel. Da 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 da. Pop goes the weasel. On Wikipedia, you can see that I'm not lying. It started out as like there's the whip, and then it started out as a dance that was for royalty. Like when these important people went to visit Queen Victoria of England, they would dance the Pop Goes the Weasel. And then it just caught on. It was so famous that everyone was dancing it everywhere, Everyone. Even all the poor folk, so to speak, so-called poor folk. And then it just changed because, they dance and there's that song. It was that song. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And then in the Queen's court, they would have a certain dance, And everyone was doing the same dance all over England. Everyone. And it is a long time now, since then. We just know it as a song that children sing. So it came, Pop Goes the Weasel, this song. Because remember, they danced to music, right? The song. So this song, Pop Goes the Weasel, comes from Queen Victoria of England. So maybe praying, sort of, in part, comes from King Solomon, like he invented praying, for people. He's a person who invented it for people, and they came down from Solomon, praying of dedication. Then Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord, in front of the whole assembly of Israel, spread out his hands. So he did something like this. Spread out his hands towards heaven and said, Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven. So this is from his father, King David. Might have been the first one to say, there is no God like you, or there is no one like you in heaven above or on earth below. You who keep your covenant of love with your servants, who continue wholeheartedly in your way. You have kept your promise to your servant David, my father. So this is a different kind of prayer. It's slightly different. It's very personal. It's kind of personal, and he's doing it in front of a lot of important people. With your mouth you have promised, and with your hand you have fulfilled it, as it is today. Now, Lord, the God of Israel, keep for your servant David, my father, the promises you made to him when you said, you shall never fail to have a successor to sit before me on the throne of Israel. If only your descendants are careful in all they do to walk before me faithfully, as you have done. And now, God of Israel, let your word that you promised your servant David, my father, come true. But will God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. So the highest heavens, as you go bigger, as you go up, they get bigger. Like this is like first heaven, second heaven is higher, but then it's bigger, and then the third one, it's bigger. So the highest heaven is like very big, and it says cannot contain you. That means it's not large enough for God to live there. He's bigger than the space. how much less this temple I have built. Yet give attention to your servant's prayer and his plea for mercy, Lord my God. Remember, Lord my God is something like Adonai Elohe. Hear the cry and the prayer. So remember, the cry is not crying. Cry is like a loud. You're being loud. A shout is people know what a shout sounds like. So the cry is just you're raising your voice. You're being louder. Hear the cry and the prayer that your servant is praying in your presence this day. May your eyes be open toward this temple, night and day, this place of which you said, my name shall be there. See, Solomon is intelligent. Earlier, the Lord, God, the Creator, he said, wherever you sacrifice or give offerings, you give offerings or you bring your offerings and you sacrifice, he has to put his name there. He has to put his name. He said, my name, it has to be. And then you wonder, okay, I just mentioned fame, and it has to be, it's like a beautiful. Anyone who goes to that temple will be like, wow, So God's stuff, for lack of a better term, has to be the best. That's what King Solomon was thinking. It just has to be the best. God is there, and there's something like his name. Everyone has. People hear about you. Everyone has a story. Some people, you're famous. So God is a person. So of course, he has something like a reputation. So if he is like the supreme being, his name must be supreme. You know what I mean? If he is the perfect being, his reputation has to be perfect, spotless. And so that you will hear the prayer your servant prays toward this place. Hear the supplication of your servant and of your people, Israel, when they pray toward this place. Hear from heaven your dwelling place, and when you hear, forgive. When anyone wrongs their neighbor. So, very interesting. You know what I just realized? The temple was a place where you just brought your sacrifice, and then the priest took part of it, and the animal was killed, and then the priest took part of the animal, and the first thing they did was offer God's portion to him, an offering, and then he gave it to you, back to you to eat, and then he actually had he didn't take very much, not of every animal, but of only 2 animals, but he would only get this part of one animal, and then it's called the breast and the thigh, but it's the chest part and the upper leg part of, one of each of those type of animals. But not all the time either, depending on what kind of offering that was being offered. Not every offering that was brought did the priests, take like their part. So they really didn't take that much from the people that were offering. And then the other stuff is super secret stuff that priests did, but they didn't really pray. And now Solomon is talking about prayer. So verse 31, when anyone wrongs their neighbor and is required to take an oath, and they come and swear the oath before your altar in this temple, then hear from heaven and act. Judge between your servants, condemning the guilty by bringing down on their heads what they have done, and vindicating the innocent by treating them in accordance with their innocence. Sorry about that. When your people Israel have been defeated by an enemy because they have sinned against you, and when they turn back to you and give praise to your name, praying and making supplication to you in this temple, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your people Israel, and bring them back to the land you gave to their ancestors. Praying and making supplication. When the heavens are shut up and there is no rain because your people have sinned against you, and when they pray toward this place and give praise to your name and turn from their sin because you have afflicted them, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your servants, your people Israel. Teach them the right way to live, and send rain on the land you gave your people for an inheritance. When famine or plague comes to the land, or blight or mildew, locusts or grasshoppers, or when an enemy besieges them in any of their cities, whatever disaster or disease may come, and when a prayer or plea is made by anyone among your people Israel, being aware of the afflictions of their own hearts, and spreading out their hands towards this temple. So when there's famine or plague, you spread out your hands towards heaven. Then hear from heaven, your dwelling place. Forgive and act. Deal with everyone according to all they do, since you know their hearts. For you alone know every human heart, so that they will fear you all the time they live in the land you gave our ancestors. As for the foreigner, remember, foreigners, I mentioned in an early video, they come from really far away. Remember, this is a different time, a long time ago. If you ask the person, where do you come from? You never heard of it. You're like, no. But sometimes they don't even really speak Hebrew. They spoke Hebrew. A foreigner might be they might as well speak Greek, so to speak. When they're talking, it's just, I have no idea. It's a language of some sort, but where do you come from? The guy's going like way over there. As for the foreigner who does not belong to your people Israel, but has come from a distant land because of your name, for they will hear of your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm. Outstretched arm might be nice. Like he's trying to hug you, outstretched arms, but only one arm, you know. It doesn't mean God only has one arm, I think he only needs one arm. Like he could beat you up with his pinky, He only needs one pinky to defeat you, His mighty hand, he only needs one hand to like knock you out, And he only needs one outstretched arm to hug you, And just hug you with one arm. When they come and pray toward this temple, then hear from heaven, your dwelling place. Do whatever the foreigner asks of you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your own people, Israel, and may know that this house I have built bears your name. When your people go to war against their enemies, wherever you send them, and when they pray to the Lord toward the city you have chosen, and the temple I have built for your name, then hear from heaven their prayer and their plea, and uphold their cause when they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin, and you become angry with them and give them over to their enemies, who take them captive to their own lands, far away or near, and if they have a change of heart in the land where they are held captive, and repent and plead with you in the land of their captors, and say, we have sinned, we have done wrong, we have acted wickedly, and if they turn back to you with all their heart and soul in the land of their enemies, who took them captive, and pray to you toward the land you gave their ancestors, toward the city you have chosen, and the temple I have built for your name, then from heaven, your dwelling place, hear their prayer and their plea, and uphold their cause, and forgive your people who have sinned against you. Forgive all the offenses they have committed against you, and cause their captors to show them mercy, for they are your people and your inheritance, whom you brought out of Egypt, out of that iron smelting furnace. May your eyes be open to your servant's plea, and to the plea of your people Israel, and may you listen to them whenever they cry out to you, for you singled them out from all the nations of the world to be your own inheritance, just as you declared through your servant Moses, when you, sovereign Lord, brought our ancestors out of Egypt. When Solomon had finished all these prayers and supplications to the Lord, he rose from before the altar of the Lord, where he had been kneeling with his hands spread out toward heaven. He stood and blessed the whole assembly of Israel in a loud voice, saying, Praise be to the Lord, who has given rest to his people Israel, just as he promised. Not one word has failed of all the good promises he gave through his servant Moses. May the Lord our God be with us as he was with our ancestors. May he never leave us nor forsake us. May he turn our hearts to him to walk in obedience to him, and keep the commands, decrees, and laws he gave our ancestors. And may these words of mine, which I have prayed before the Lord, be near to the Lord our God, day and night, that he may uphold the cause of his servant, and the cause of his people, Israel, according to each day's need, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God, and that there is no other. You know, Jewish people have this echad word. You know, it might mean that there is no other. You know, I'm a prophet. I'm just guessing. They have something like, I think it's Shema. Shema is Hear, O Israel. Shema Israel. Adonai Eloheinu. Adonai Echad. Echad. It says, Hear Israel. Adonai Eloheinu. The Lord our God. Adonai Echad. Lord is one. They say it means God is one. You know, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one. You know, I thought that one meant he's the Godhead. You know, he's Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. You know, he's God in three persons. But Echad means, they say it means something like one. But, you know, one could mean like unified. You know, like Adonai Echad. Lord unified. You know, he is, because Adonai, you could add many things to the word Adonai. Like Adonai Eloheinu is the Lord our God. And then you could call him like Adonai El Shaddai. I mean, Adonai Shaddai. You know, El Shaddai means God Almighty. So you could say Adonai Shaddai. You know, you could call him Lord Almighty. So Echad is something like unity or unified. If you call him Adonai Echad, you're calling him something like the God of unity. You know, Lord, the unifier, or like the Lord who unifies us. You know, the Lord who makes us one. You know. But I don't know, you know, a lot of Hebrew words, they're complex words. Like, there's two meanings to the one word. I just kind of think so, that there is no other. You know, King David and King Solomon, they have this, there is none like you. You know, there is no other. There is no other choice. There, I don't know. See, it's complex. So, Echad, you know, it may mean that there is no other. But see, if you're all unified, then there's no one else, you know. So there's no other, you know. Because you're all one. And furthermore, if you are unified against your enemies, you can wipe them all out, right? Remember? The Lord is always like, do not be afraid. Don't hold back. Joshua the general, Yehoshua. Destroy your enemies, you know. Verse 61, and may your hearts be fully committed to the Lord our God, to live by his decrees and obey his commands as at this time. So the next section is titled The Dedication of the Temple. Then the king, that's Solomon, and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before the Lord. So they all, like one by one, you know, brought sacrifices, you know, offerings. Solomon offered a sacrifice of fellowship offerings to the Lord, 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep and goats. So the king and all the Israelites dedicated the temple of the Lord. On that same day, the king consecrated the middle part of the courtyard in front of the temple of the Lord. And there he offered burnt offerings, grain offerings, and the fat of the fellowship offerings, because the bronze altar that stood before the Lord was too small to hold the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, and the fat of the fellowship offerings. So there, I was wondering about the bronze altar. Remember, you can sacrifice right onto the ground. You have to watch the earlier video. The Lord said, do not. I want an altar of earth, and then He said something like, His altars, they're not really raised. You know what I mean? They're not like. Because the altars were like a table. But the altar not being raised is like not too high, like not way up there, And He said, I don't want steps going up to the altar. So really, He wanted I wanted an altar of the earth, on the earth. So I think because the bronze altar was too small, they would just offer and sacrifice right on the ground, right on the ground. Thank you for... There's more. Verse 65. So Solomon observed the festival at that time, and all Israel with him. A vast assembly, people from Lebo, Hamath, to the Wadi of Egypt. They celebrated it before the Lord our God. Remember what's the Lord our God? Adonai Eloheinu. For 7 days and 7 days more, 14 days in all. On the following day, He sent the people away. They blessed the king and then went home, joyful and glad in heart, for all the good things the Lord had done for His servant David and His people Israel. Okay, thank you for listening. Remember, keep God first. He'll take you places.